Hey guys, it's Q&A Tuesday. Right off the bat, what's on my wrist? I always forget to do this, so I'll show you. This is the watch that Ian briefly got to wear for 5 minutes while he was taping the intro for the last 100th episodes of Q&A, the RM11 Quartz. Love this watch. Certainly not a first watch one would own or a first Richard Mille because it's pretty loud and red. Definitely a kick-ass piece. It's super rare. They only made 50 of these, very hard to find. They trade in the low 200s if you can actually find one. Let's move on to some questions. Here's one from a gentleman named McCobb, which I'm assuming is his last name based on an email. He actually sent a couple of questions. I responded. He followed up with another one, which I really like. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he's specifically talking about quartz watches. He specifically talked about the new Hamilton PSR, which was a reissue of the famous Pulsar digital watch from the 70s. He's intrigued by them, but $700 for steel, $1,000 for the gold PVR limited edition. He felt that was a lot of money to spend on a quartz watch. And on the same notes, how often do you wear quartz watches? And in general, what percentage of watches you sell and trade would you say are automatic or hand wind? As a watch snob, I definitely prefer them offhand. What is the most expensive quartz watch you've ever sold or owned yourself? Quartz watches in general, we discussed this before, took the world by storm during what we call quartz wars in the watch business, right? When Seiko did their first quartz watch and they thought it was going to be the end of the Swiss watch industry as we knew it. And guess what? In your question, you said, as a watch snob, I definitely prefer automatics and mechanicals. And it was a brief stunt of quartz watches. There was a brand new world created in watches, cheaper watches actually, that have a strong following till this day. And there are a lot more quartz watches being sold out there today than mechanical expensive pieces from major brands such as AP, Rolex, Jaeger, IWC, etc. And the reason for that is because they're more affordable, right? There's a lot more Toyota Corollas being sold than there are S500 Mercedes-Benzes, right? Because at the end of the day, we live in the world where not everyone can afford an S500, but a lot more people can afford a Toyota Corolla. How often do I wear quartz watches? Sometimes I will reach back for some old vintage piece that's been sitting in my safe somewhere, and I will certainly wear it. I did have a Rolex Oyster quartz that I wore for a while, which was part of my vintage collection and never really went anywhere. In terms of value. That's probably the most expensive quartz watch I've ever sold, if I had to think back. Right? There's no $1 million quartz watches out there. And quartz watches, even from major brands, have never really made it because all those quartz watches those manufacturers made was just an answer to fight off the quartz invasion by Seiko. And they never really got popular because quartz never really took off. There's something about a mechanical and hand-wound piece that just sinks to people. Anytime somebody looks at a quartz watch and they can't get over the idea that it's a battery-operated watch. Now I know there's like solar-operated quartz watches and there's a bunch of other things that have come around since then in terms of technology, but at the end of the day, people still look at these things as battery-operated. And another biggest reason is the fact that once that technology started being used widely, it's cheap to produce those movements, right? So every Dick and Harry can make a quartz watch. You can get out to a factory in China that can make you quartz watches for as low as $5 to $10 a watch, brand them, market the shit out of them, get them out there, and MVNT watches were born, right? Which took the world by storm, and they got bought out by the Movado Group, right? I mean, for some ridiculous amount of money, right? But in reality, that watch costs probably $10 to produce, maybe 12. And that's why those that buy quartz watches never get the warm and fuzzy feeling inside of this being a high-end watch. Even though you can buy an expensive quartz watch for $1,000, you still don't get that same feel because there are other quartz watches out there for $100 or even $50, and you get that feel in the back of your head that says, oh, wait a minute, it's still a quartz watch, and people are still going to look at it as that cheap battery-operated watch, even though it may be a great watch. What I also wanted to touch upon is your follow-up question, which was, I'm seriously considering a watch right now from Armand Nicolet, and would love your input. I know you always say buy what you like. I like this one, but I'm familiar with the brand. I was wondering if you had any insider recommendations about it. And he gave me a link from Joma Shop, one of my competitors who I'm actually very friendly with. I've known Marvin, who owns Joma Shop for 15 plus years. So here's a Armand Nicolet L11. Kind of looks like a Patek. It is not a quartz watch, it's a hand-wound movement. The watch retails for $5,900. And it's selling for $950, 84% off. I know who made the brand Armand Nicolet personally. I know the guy that built this brand maybe about 10 years ago or so, right? What you have today is, let's take me for example. If tomorrow I wanted to go out and create a Swiss brand, right? I can do one of two things. I can create it from scratch, right? I can go out there, purchase the movements, Swiss-made movements, purchase the cases, purchase the strap, and purchase all these parts separately, have somebody put it together in Switzerland for me, and voila, I have a brand. I then get to set retail prices on those watches as I see fit and spend millions of dollars on marketing these watches and actually trying to create a brand, hire an ambassador that's expensive and spend millions upon millions and trying to take that brand off the ground. Odds are I will fail, and the reason I will fail is because there are too many old boys out there that I'd be competing with, right? As far as quality of movement and everything else, it depends on how much money I decide to choose. Depends on who I decide to choose to manufacture those movements for me. If I go with Jaeger, or if I go with somebody like Christophe Claret, who's going to make something crazy for me, but he's going to charge me an arm and a leg for every single movement, so therefore my retail prices are going to have to be huge. But there's another route. You do the same thing, but you don't spend a whole lot of money on marketing, right? You put up a basic website, you do basic things to let the world know that a brand actually exists out there, and then you close it out. That's called manufacturing closeouts, and that's what Armand Nicolet always was. It was a manufacturer closeout. That's why when they created the brand, they said, okay, they set the retail prices. They figured that, you know what, our cost off the retail price to manufacture this all in is, let's say, 10 cents on a dollar. Then they go out and they close it out at 20 cents on a dollar, 30 cents on a dollar. And then you see them online for huge discounts. But you're saying here, wait a minute, this is at 84 off, right? Well, look at it differently. If the retail price is $5,900, that doesn't mean this watch could have cost them about $300 to $400 to manufacture, let's say. Therefore, they can go out there and resell it for $500-600, making 20%. And somebody like Joma can resell it for $950, making 30%. Another big thing that they did here is Armand Nicolet actually existed. Right on the dollar, it says 1959 to 2011. I guess this is signifying some sort of anniversary, I don't know. So this brand has been around. So what you do is you go out there and for no money, pretty much, there's so many Swiss brands out there that have started and closed. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of older brands. Some go back 100 years. You buy the rights to the name, like Armand Nicolet, and you go to manufacture on their behalf. There was a brand recently called Quartz Watches. That was another one of those brands where the gentleman by the name of Lance from Florida bought the rights to that watch brand, makes these cool, funky skeleton watches. And they were pretty popular for a while, except at this point, I don't think they're anywhere to be found, right? And then I know the next thing you're going to ask me is what happens to the resale value of a watch? Well, it doesn't matter if it's Armand Nicolet, Craig, or any other brands that has been revived or made new. If you see this watch online for 84% off retail, that should tell you something in terms of its retail value. But at the same token, I always said, buy what you like first and foremost, enjoy it. And you know what? A watch that seemingly retails for $6,000 for $950 doesn't seem like a bad deal. Hope this sheds a little bit of light into this topic because you guys have asked me about this before, and I hope that this somewhat helped as usual. Here's a good question from Fred Zamorano. Hi Roman, first of all, thanks so much for continuing to make such great videos. I've been following your channel for a while. Your channel has been a great source of information and inspiration for my own channel. And shameless plug, what is your channel? Shah Lusso, let's check it out. So Mr. Lusso also has a watch channel. Guys, show him some love. It's S-H-A-H, Lusso, L-U-S-S-O. It seems like he does a lot of hands-on reviews. My question is regarding the benefit and disadvantage of high pieces. I've spoken with a few dealers, and the general consensus that high pieces like Steel Rolex, Patek, Nautilus, AP Royal Oak, Richard Mille, etc. are great for getting customers in the door or rewarding loyal clients, but tend to give poor margins, and the real margins are in the non-high pieces that they can buy low. Is this the case for your business? In an ideal world, would you prefer a market where prices were more leveled out, or would you keep things as they are with a few select pieces with lower margins but bringing other benefits as I mentioned above? You are correct on one thing. There are lower margins on high pieces because it's a hot product and everybody wants it. So that's pretty obvious in any business. So any hot piece out there, yes, they do give poor margins, right? Richard Mille, I think last year we averaged out to a whopping 6.7% margin on Richard Mille, right? But of course, 6.7% margins on an average ticket of $200,000 is a decent chunk of change, but the margins are still not there, right? Remember, we still have to invest that kind of money in order to make the profit. In an ideal world, would you prefer a market where prices were more leveled out? Absolutely not. This is what makes the watch world exciting. If the watch world was simply cut and dry, when you had exactly the same pricing, exactly the same discount, and it stayed like that throughout the years, I don't think the collecting aspect of it would be as great for the end users and even for dealers. You know, we're out there day in and day out. We all know that the money is in the buy, right? And that's why we can make better margins in some of the less hype pieces, or sometimes even in the hype pieces. But the excitement is in the buy. It's the chase, right? It's the chase and it's the buy that excites most dealers. And it seems like you're someone that also sells watches, but not just reviews them. So you would have to absolutely agree with me, but that the excitement is in the buy for guys like us, just as much as the excitement is in the buy for the end consumer. So no, I would not want a flat world when it comes to watches. I don't think the watch world would survive if it was as cut and dry as buying socks and t-shirts online. I think the way it is now is what makes it so exciting. And if there's time for second question, a lot of people talk about how the current scenario has affected the high pieces, lower prices, private sellers, collectors selling off to the market to free up cash, etc. But have you seen any significant changes in the less popular on hype model? Are their prices going down? Is demand for them going down or staying the same? I'm not sure if it's too broad to answer without going into specific models, but any insight would be much appreciated. So, I mean, look, we already got over the question of Corona affecting the market. I caught a lot of shit from some of the viewers when I said the market is not affected, and they were saying it's the end of the world, blah, 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 blah. Well, it's been about almost 3 months since I posted that video, and as all of you can see, the market has not been affected. So I wanted to get that out of the way, and it's not, and I told you so, but I guess it kind of is. I told you so, you know, and again, I don't like making predictions, but I told you so. I did say how it was at the very, very moment, and I gave my opinion on the fact that Corona isn't going to hurt the market. In fact, I saw retail sales improve over the time of Corona. Everybody's at home shopping online, right? As far as the change in less popular on hype models, it's more or less the same. It goes hand in hand. Hype pieces affect the prices of less popular on hype models. How do they affect it specifically? Because I'm sure that's pretty obvious that, you know, the hype stuff sells and sells better. It's easy to say that, but let me try to explain it. Now, it's pretty obvious because, look, you have stuff that's hype in there, therefore it's affecting stuff that's less hyped, so the prices go down a little bit on that, and the prices go up on the hype stuff, right? Supply and demand. I'm a dealer. I am buying a lot of watches. And in those watches, a bunch of hype stuff, and there's a bunch of not so hype stuff. How am I going to look at that deal, right? Let's say I'm buying out a collection of 20 pieces, right? Or I'm buying out a deal. It doesn't really matter, right? And I look at the hype stuff, and I know this I have to pay up for because as I'm buying, I know that I can't lowball on the hype stuff because it's extremely transparent. All the hype models, everybody knows the pricing, everybody knows the market. They're all over the place, listed for stupid pricing, so you can't really lowball on that. You just have to make a reasonable, an offer that's within reason on that particular watch, where the guy simply understands, look, I'm leaving myself a little bit to eat, 5 to 10% usually, sometimes even less. You know, he just has to be happy with the fact that I'm out there. He's doing a safe sale where I'm writing a check right away, et cetera, et cetera. Then I look at the pieces that are not so hype. Not so hype doesn't mean they are not popular, right? There's plenty of guys out there that buy nothing but IWCs or Jaegers or Panerais or brands that are seemingly not as hype today as they were 5 years ago. I am lucky enough to have the diversity of clients and the years in business where I have an ass for every seat, right? So I know, and a lot of my salespeople know off the bat, when we buy a watch, whenever we buy a watch and stuff comes in, told you stuff, all this stuff comes on what's on my desk, right? Pun intended. And a lot of my salespeople, they're right here, especially Anna, my sales manager. She's the first one in my office when she sees stuff, all right? This morning we received the Malca package from Hong Kong, right? She was the first one in here looking at, hey, what came in? Because in the back of her head, she knows at least of 2, 3, 4, 5 clients per watch as it comes in, right? And it's not necessarily hype stuff. Sometimes it's not the hype stuff. But as a seller or as a buyer, I often take advantage of that as well. Again, remember, the money is always in the buy. So even though I may have a client for whom I can sell a watch for a nice profit, right? Or let's say a regular profit, that's not a hype piece, I can ride on the fact that this is not a hype piece and offer slightly less, because there's not a lot of guys out there like me that are buying these type of watches, period, because they're not hype. Most dealers tend to stick to, you know, the hype stuff. It's easy come, easy go, easy flip, boom, make your 3, 4, 5%, and you're done. And you don't have to worry about stocking an old IWC Perpetual or some of the other crazy shit that guys have shown you, like some of these odd tourbillons and minute repeaters and things of that nature, right? But I do have diversity within that business. So therefore, that's one way that price gets lowered. Another way that price gets lowered, let's say it's a dog of a piece. It's not just less hype, it's just not a good piece at all, something that takes a while to sell. That's when I'm really going to offer a much lower price. Why? Return on investment over time. If I know that, look, on average, this may take me up to 6 months to sell, I can't deal with a 10% profit. It has to be 20, 25, 30, depending on how expensive or cheap the watch is, right? Because look, if I'm buying a watch for $200,000, $300,000, and I know this may take me up to a year to make it, if I make my 20% on that, let's say on the $300,000, that's 60 grand, that's okay. But if that same watch is $5,000, 20% only equates to 1,000. Now, that same watch is, let's say, $3,000 sales price, right? 20% is only $600, and that's also not enough if I know that watch is going to take me up to a year to sell. So I'm going to want to buy that watch with the thoughts of making 30% or 40% margins, because the dollar amount is not that big right now. And this is kind of how we look at this stuff, and this is why have you seen significant change in the less popular unhyped model? There are no chances that prices are not going down. It's a question of how right one wants to buy, right? And then it's also a question of ethics. If somebody comes at me with a $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 watch, right? Usually it comes to lower price watches. And I know this watch is a dog. It can take me forever, so I may not sell it at all. And odds are, the best I would want to pay is, let's say, $500 for the watch. And there's a lot of deals out there that will take advantage, because odds are this person has been out there shopping this watch around and he's been getting certain offers for it. And I encourage you guys to do that. You don't have to come to one shop, shop your stuff around, see how much money you'll get for it, right? Just keep in mind, and this is where you guys always come back at me, it's like if you're trading, it's one price. If you're flat out selling, it's another. Oftentimes you guys will go to somebody else and say, yeah, I was offered $4,000 for this watch. Well, the watch is worth $2,000. I'm like, well, was that a trade? Oh, yeah, I was trading it towards something else. Well, yeah, it's very easy for me to offer you $4,000 for something and then upcharge more on the watch that you're buying, therefore masking the fact that your watch is only worth $2,000. But oftentimes you'll hear me say, and some of you guys know this, some of you viewers are actually my clients, I oftentimes have told you, you know what, don't bother selling this watch. Because the amount of money this watch is worth, it's almost not worth selling it. You're rather off keeping it, having it stay around, pass it on to somebody, give it to somebody as a gift. Because look, if you bought a watch but you paid 10 grand for it, today it's worth $1,500, I'll tell you, just keep it. I won't try to steal it and rob it for $500 or $1,000. I'd rather knowing how much you paid, and I'll just pass on the watch, but politely pass by telling you that, look, it is simply not worth selling it, right? So prices of unhyped models, hype models, middle tier hype, low tier hype, no hype, whatever you want to call it, hype, yes, they are forever changing, but they're not changing based on the fact of the market. There's, for say, no market on pieces that are 10 years old, 5 years old, especially ones that there's a lot of. It's a question of how well can a dealer do on the buy, and how well can the seller do on the sell. And that's really what it comes down to. It's very easy to say market on hype pieces, stuff that's traded constantly, daily, and so on and so forth. But, how often do I trade a Mabusine Tourbillon that I showed you guys, or a York Heisig minute repeater? There's no market on that. It's based on what I bought it for, what margin I expect, and what I deem, per my experience, what this watch is really worth. But even that is still based on what I think I can possibly sell it for. So Fred, I hope this shines a little bit of an answer to your question. Guys, don't forget to check out the channel, Shahlusso, SHAHLUSSO, link it below. By the way, I don't mind giving shout outs to like-minded channel, like mine, especially if it's a watch channel. I remember very vividly when I first opened up my Instagram account, and I would ask certain guys for shout-outs that had bigger accounts, and they were all snobby about it, didn't want to do it, or they felt like I was competition or something. I don't care, if you guys have a cool channel, especially that's watch related, I'm more than happy to shout you guys out. Let's move on to the next question. Next question comes from Justin. Hey Roman, thank you for your videos. You're welcome. Got to watch your Dubai vlog and got some questions. Is English sufficient to do business in the Middle East? What skills do you think are important, especially for foreign markets like Middle East or Hong Kong? Also, the coronavirus got me thinking about the finance about watch dealers. How does your capital structure work, and how leverage are dealers usually? Looking forward to next Tuesday. Okay, well, first of all, English is very sufficient in the Middle East. I mean, of course, there are parts of the Middle East where people don't speak English, but for the most part, I have never had an issue in the Middle East. And I've been to plenty of countries in the Middle East, and for the most part, pretty much everybody out there speaks English. Some kind of a broken English, but some sort of an English, and you can certainly conversate. Besides the Dubai video, I posted the Armand video, if you guys remember. Their English is extremely prominent. And my buddy Mohammed, his kid's first language is actually English. He himself is educated in London, and he speaks perfect English, pretty much with no accent, and his children's first language is actually English, not Arabic, oddly enough. So English is extremely sufficient. But what you're saying here is, what skills you think are important, especially for foreign markets like Middle East or Hong Kong? It's culture. It's learning the people's culture. Oftentimes, you know how they say people from New York are rude as hell, and especially from Philly, where I'm at, they call it the city of brotherly love, but it usually isn't. And then you go back to California, especially Northern California, people are very, very extremely nice and very laid back, and it's a difference in culture, right? Even within one country. Well, the Middle East is the same thing. They have a certain culture. A lot of their cultures is around food or smoking a hookah or shisha, as they call it. So the skills you want to possess is you want to, if it's your first time going out there, is to pay attention to those things, because at the end of the day, doing business is very, very personal, especially in our business. And you don't want to offend somebody by saying something stupid. You don't want to walk into a restaurant in the Middle East and ask for a pork chop. Obviously, it's known they don't eat pork in the Middle East. Well, obviously, it's very well known that they don't eat pork, right? So, and again, that's just a stupid example, obviously, but you get what I'm getting at. Learning the culture, learning the people, learning the people's way, is the way to do it. In Hong Kong, for example, a lot of the Chinese nationals, especially from mainland China, they tend to come off very, very rude. Oftentimes, you walk on the street and people will knock into you and not say excuse me and keep walking as if they didn't even see you. That's actually very familiar to it. It was the same thing back when I lived in the Soviet Union. It's a cultural thing. So sometimes learn not to take offense to certain things that may be offensive to you. Don't get your panties in a bunch over some dumb shit just because it happens to be part of a certain culture. Or bargaining, for example. There's certain cultures out there, and again, I don't need to label anybody here, right? But there's certain cultures out there where haggling is a sport. Oftentimes I used to offer, show somebody a watch for $100,000. They would offer me 15. I would get offended, but then I realized it's part of their culture. This is what I like to do. I like to haggle. Don't take offense to certain things. And this is really what you need to learn. And honestly, you can learn a lot just by reading online, right? Of course, online also gives you a lot of bullshit information as well. Most of the time you'll learn as you go along, right? When I first visited Taipei, for example, I learned that it's disrespectful not to take the cup of tea that they gave every time you enter let's say every time I enter a store or an office or something like that. It's a sign of disrespect. Ended up drinking 27 cups of tea a day, and my bladder was blowing up, right? As far as financial capital structure, how leverage are dealers usually, I'm not going to get into the details. That's a bit private in terms of leveraging, but we do leverage quite a lot because our business formula is so simple. The more stuff we have, the more money we make, which means the more inventory. So oftentimes we'll leverage, especially when you're in wholesale, you leverage things like accounts receivables, right, versus accounts payables. So if I'm able to get terms of 60, let's say 30, 60, 90 from certain vendors, I can then take those terms and give it to my customers. But if, let's say, you take terms of 30, 60, 90 days, let's say you buy $120,000, in 30 days 40 is due, in 60 days another 40 is due, in 90 days another 40 is due. Well, that sort of triples your buying power because now you're only paying out a third of whatever bill you have, right? See what I'm talking about? So lots of that leveraging going on. Obviously, money's from the bank. Very tough to get money from the bank in our industry because we're all dubbed as jewelers. And jewelers, unfortunately, do not have a good history in regards to, going belly up because it's very easy to put everything in a suitcase and walk out. So yes, there is definitely leverage going on. It would be stupid not to do so because you literally are able to double, triple, and quadruple your buying power and your business while doing that. Just have to be careful not to get caught up, much like a consumer can get caught up with credit cards, if that makes sense. So I hope that answers your question somewhat, Justin. Next question from Scott, and this is going to be a question back to all of you guys. I recently came across your channel and website. I find your knowledge and willingness to share your knowledge fantastic. I did subscribe. Thank you. And you guys that are watching that are subscribed, hit the subscribe button. It means a lot. It's actually cool to know luxury resides literally a 10-minute drive away. I'm in Willow Grove. I actually grew up in Willow Grove. My parents had a house in Willow Grove right before I went to the military. I lived in Willow Grove. Anyway, I've been placed on furlough during the pandemic. I've been reevaluating my life goals and strategy to achieve those goals recently. As I was plunking around the internet looking for luxury watches, I've had a passing interest in them over the years, but I can't afford anything. I stumbled across a video about selling and trading luxury watches. To pique my interest and started investigating the concept. Part of what intrigued me was the idea that I could either do this as a job or as an additional income stream. I've looked through a handful of your videos relatable to the exchange of watches and feel like it would be hard to do on a part-time basis. My question is about a specific company upon which I stumbled, Watch Trading Academy. They say they teach you how to do it. They provide some of the resources to get you started. Is this for real? I realize a lot of the flash and glamour on these videos is hype, and that it, as you often point out, the market fluctuates constantly, so everyone might have a different experience with ease and timing of sales. But is it legit and something that could be done part-time, or is it smarter to try to get a job in luxury watch retail, which could be a full or part-time job? Well, I've been asked about this Watch Trading Academy, the guy that shows you wads of cash and fancy watches and shows you how to buy a Ferrari. I haven't watched any of that stuff. I don't know if you have to sign up and pay for it or something. So my question to you is, I don't really do reaction videos to other people's videos. I feel like I may not stop myself from either making fun of those people or saying something nasty, or finding myself disagreeing with a lot of the stuff that they would say. And if I find myself agreeing with everything that's in the video, it's a great video, I prefer to just give it a shout out rather than talk over it if it's already a good video. I don't know if that makes sense. But if you guys think I should look at these get rich quick or get into the business quick type videos, let's say one from Watch Trading Academy, comment below and let me know. If I have to sign up for it, I'll pay whatever they charge, and I'll go through the videos and see if I agree or disagree with it. So yeah, vote or comment, whatever. Let me know if you think I should do this. I don't know if these, like I said, I don't know if these guys charge or not, but if they charge, whatever, I'll pay for it. No big deal. I'd be actually curious. But to answer your question, in terms of legit or not legit, I don't know. I don't know who these guys are. I haven't really done any of these courses. Well, technically, I don't need them. I would be curious to see what they actually try to teach you. Is it smart to get a job in a luxury watch retail, which could be full or part-time? It is. Actually, it is pretty smart because you learn hands-on. So, for example, a lot of my salespeople that have been with me 10 plus years right now, they can get out there and get into this business just the same. They don't, because they're loyal to me and they're compensated extremely well. But at the same token, by working in a particular industry, you gain enough experience. And if you're working for a small business, which even though the numbers are huge of our company, we're still a small business, you do get to learn a lot of things hands-on, and you get to learn a lot of other aspects. The problem is, and especially being a salesperson, you get to learn what people like, what the markets are, what the prices are, what the buy is, what the sell is, et cetera, et cetera. So it really gives you a great hand-on if you decide to get out there and go on your own. Hope that answers your question, Scott. Here's a question that I'm finally getting to from Prashant Sangdi. He emailed me. I said I will air some things. COVID went down and all that other stuff, kind of lost in translation. The guy followed up with me again. So I'm going to answer his questions. He's like, Roman, I love your work, your YouTube videos. I love watching your trip video blogs that you put up every time you're traveling. Really waiting for you to plan a trip to India as well. I mentioned this before. I was planning a 2-week trip to India with my wife sometime in the future. I love the cuisine. I like the fact that there are 20 to 30 different cultures within India itself, not to mention how many dialects are spoken, and therefore the cuisines as well. Obviously, the Taj Mahal, right? And last but not least, I told my wife I want to ride the death train. Of course, my wife said I'm nuts and that's not happening because she's not going to have me fall off the top of a train, but I would have loved to have done that with my camera. I can just see myself hanging off the side of the train or standing on the roof with my vlogging camera. It seems like a pretty cool experience. Of course, I'm a married man with 3 kids, and my wife will probably not allow me to do that, but that's a side note. I've been seeing videos being put up suggesting buying quantity over quality, and especially the lower end stuff. And also, I would like to reference Federico's video on the same topic, where he suggested it's better to buy what you like and better to save up and buy one watch for, say, $2,000 to $3,000 rather than having 10, 15, $100 or $200 watches. My question is, does this hold true on the higher segment as well? Now we're talking, let's say, 10K watches. Is it better to have 10 to 15 10K watches pre-owned? The list price of these watches could be very well 2 to 3 times, and good brands like Breguet, Chopard, Girard-Perregaux, Rolex, etc., or save up and buy just 1 or 2 higher-end pieces like Patek, Vacheron, Constant, A-Lang, F.P. Journe, and APs. So when it comes to lower-end pieces, I do find a lot of guys getting out there and buying themselves 20 to 30 lower-end watches. And this is what they're content with. And these guys, you will never convince otherwise that if you just bought, one $3,000 watch, then 10 $300 watches or 15 $200 watches, because this is what they choose to do. And there's no right or wrong, right? It's what you buy, what you like first and foremost. You know what? When it comes to lower end watches that are $100, $200, doesn't seem like a bad idea. I know a couple of guys that have like 50 watches that are anywhere from $100 to $300. And guess what? They get to change their watches out every single week, every single day, as often as they feel. They treat watches as accessories to match their sneakers or their shirt or their outfits.
Should I wear this Tech 9 with the high tops? Or this Uzi with my low tops?
A lot of these lower end goods, they also have cool limited editions and tributes and sponsors and things of that nature. So there's a story with them as well. So there's no right or wrong answer in terms of collecting up and getting a higher watch. And same translates to some of the higher end brands, let's say 10K watches, as you said. There's lots of guys out there that want diversity. Diversity, which I discussed previously many times. Sporty watch, dressy watch, diverse watch, a military style watch, a vintage watch. Complications, there's so many variations, right? That often you can't fit all into one watch. So what do? You diversify within the budget that you have. Me personally, I like to diversify across price ranges, right? So if you say 10 watches at 10K, that's $100,000. I would rather have probably 4 or 5 watches for that $100,000, where some are going to be lower price and some are going to be higher price, usually based on complications, rarity, et cetera, or let's say, or some of the vintage stuff gets up there as well, right? So that would be my choice, but that's my choice. Just because you decide to set a budget per watch at $10,000 and continue buying $10,000 watches and end up with a collection of 50 watches at $10,000 at a later time, there's nothing wrong with that either. It's also a lot easier to sell, right? Because the cheaper the watches, the easier they are to resell after the fact, right? It's also a lot easier to swap out and trade out of watches, right? It's a lot easier to trade $10,000 watches for $10,000 watches. Odds are you'll take a 10-20% hit on something and you're okay. Now go try trading out, $70,000, $80,000 watches or $100,000 watch. Let's say you buy the hottest Royal Oak out there today or the hottest Nautilus for $100,000, right? And then the market flips like it did in '08 and all of a sudden that watch is worth half. Odds are that won't happen to $10,000 watches. See what I'm saying? So technically it is kind of better to have a lot more watches because you're sort of hedging your risk in terms of resale value, right? But at the same token, again, it's to each his own. And personally, to answer your question, I would prefer to look at a number as a whole. If my total budget, let's say for watches, because one has an idea of just how many watches can I own, right? How much money do I want to have in watches? I can afford to have in watches and I'm willing to have in watches. If you have that number, great. Odds are you won't because that's always shifting, right? As you're growing up, as you're becoming more successful, you're making more money, you tend to, splurge more on expensive toys. It's very hard for a novice collector that's just starting out there buying his first $10,000 watch to say, well, you know what, I'm gonna have $100,000 worth of watches in the next 5 years. But overall, over time, you kind of know, what's acceptable, There's only so many times you can tell your wife, oh, look at this new watch I bought, So how much was it? It was $1,500, and meanwhile, it's a $20,000 watch, right? And again, of course, that's a joke, but you kind of will know, for example, for me, myself, right? I can afford a $200,000 watch, but I don't own a $200,000 watch. Why? Because I don't feel I'm in a position to do so. I think, I'm still young and I still have many other obligations like tuitions and weddings and 3 children and a new home that I bought that I want to improve on and things of that nature, right? So it's like, do I take my kids' college funds and go buy myself a Ferrari? Yeah, I can afford it. Is it a smart move? No, it's not. So you kind of have to think in that realm. But there are advantages to having multiple watches versus one expensive, as I just mentioned. There are disadvantages of having many watches because then you kind of get lost, right? You have all these watches, you don't know which one to wear, and then you're not sure if you're happy with this one. And the more you have, the more you're going to prefer one over another, which will often result in you selling off some of the stuff that you like less, even though it might be a great watch to keep. So many factors that go into it, but I hope that I did shine some light into your question. Prashant, I apologize for the delay, but nevertheless, as they say, better late than never, and maybe perhaps when I finally do make it out to India, we can hook up and have a good meal. Well, guys, that's it for me for today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. As I always say, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button down there, right down there. If you're not already a subscriber and are watching my video, it means a lot. And last but not least, share this stuff with your friends. I always tell you this is the one thing that helps my channel grow organically. Other than that, I'll see you guys next Tuesday.